Hey everyone, this is Ask the Pastor. My name is Ryan, and I field questions from the internet about theology and ministry, and sometimes wearing pots on my head. I've got a question today. It asks, why is it that God is depicted as violent and angry in the Old Testament if through Jesus we come to know that God is loving? Well, that is a very worthwhile question, but it is a complex question. That is to say that it is a question that contains assumptions within it. Not that it is a question that uses too many big words or something, but it contains parts of it that aren't a question. When you ask, why is it that God is depicted as angry and violent in the Old Testament, I have to say that question is wrong. God is not depicted as angry and violent in the Old Testament, particularly not by comparison to the New Testament. Now, there are areas of the Old Testament where there seem to be kind of violent angrinesses going on. In certain aspects of Joshua, God gets very angry with God's people for taking part of the child sacrificing tribes and incorporating them into themselves. But that's, in many ways, kind of understandable. And if you turn to the New Testament, I mean, you would be hard-pressed if you were just reading the Old Testament to try to come up with anything like the doctrine of hell or eternal damnation. Hell is getting talked about all over the New Testament. And it's in the New Testament where we have the book of Revelation, where God is coming with wrath and there's going to be blood up to the horses' bridles. Meanwhile, in the Old Testament, many of the teachings, even the teachings that seem kind of old-fashioned and barbaric, might be a better word, are so filled with grace. I mean, for instance, if you look at Leviticus, and you look at the sacrificial system, people are like, oh, angry God of Leviticus giving us all these rules, and if we don't live up to the rules, then we're in deep trouble. Well, read Leviticus. If you don't live up to the rules in Leviticus, then what happens is once a year, the high priest goes in to the Holy of Holies, and he comes out and he lays his hands on a goat. And he puts the sins of the community on the goat, and they cast those sins away, and everyone is atoned. Everyone's forgiven. The goat does the work. So there's this incredible statement of grace that, there are rules, there are expectations, but I'm going to find a way to work with you. I am the Lord. So why is it that New Testament communities tend to talk about love and grace and gentleness so much, and then we turn our heads to the Old Testament and we see laws and expectations and justice? Well, the reality is that God is both. And it's a good thing that God is both, because if God was just a purring kitten all the time and was just love and gentleness and kindness and forgiveness, and there's no room in my understanding for right and wrong and for ending injustice and for silencing oppressors and for freeing slaves, then we wouldn't have the trajectory that we have, where we're taking everybody with us to the kingdom of heaven, right? We are building a new kind of world, and that involves recognizing some things in the old kind of world are no good, and we don't like them. And so God recognizes those things in both the Old and the New Testament. God has expectations in both the Old and the New Testament, and God is loving and desires relationship and offers forgiveness in both the Old and the New Testament. Most of our problem, I would argue, is a difficulty understanding and relating to the Old Testament that comes largely from Bible teachers who themselves prefer the New Testament and just have a better relationship with it and color the Old Testament in bad terms. They ought not do that. The New Testament has plenty of angry God in it if you're looking for angry God, and the Old Testament has plenty of grace in it if you're looking for grace. So, if you thought this was a good answer and I answered your question, I would like to challenge you to share this video and say, hey, I asked this pastor a question. He actually answered me. He did a good job. Whether you're convinced or not, whether you're like, all right, I'm jumping on board, to say, well, you answered it, would be wonderful. And I'd love for you to do that. If I didn't answer your question, make me another video. Tell me what I didn't get. Point out some passages in the Old Testament or New Testament that you're particularly worried about, and we'll dialogue together. That'd be great. And if you've got another question that's unrelated or perhaps is related, you can send it to me. Put it down in the YouTube comments or reach me however you want to reach me. You can tweet me on a Facebook or send me a Marco Polo, and I will answer your question. In the meantime, check out some of these other things, and you might enjoy them. Bye.